The night sky above the alien capital was alive with lights. Great towers of glass and stone shone like crystal mountains, and flying ships moved silently between them. In the center of the city stood the Grand Palace, a building so large and bright that it looked like a star fallen to the ground. Tonight the palace welcomed a very rare guest, a human. John Carter walked slowly across the shining bridge that led to the main hall. He had traveled far from Earth, across silent space, to stand here among the stars. His suit was clean, his boots polished, but his hands trembled. He was only one man, alone, entering the court of 1,000 aliens. Still, his chest was full of pride. He told himself, "This is history. Tonight, humanity sits at the same table, as kings." The gates opened with a low hum and golden light spilled out. The air smelled of flowers, smoke, and something sharp like metal. 2 alien guards bowed to him. Their armor glowed faintly, and their eyes were the color of molten silver. John nodded back, forcing a smile, though his throat was dry. Inside, the banquet hall, every wall was covered in gems and moving lights. Strange banners hung from the ceiling, each showing symbols of victory and power. Long tables curved around the room, covered in plates that glowed faint blue, filled with food John could not name. Musicians played on instruments of glass and bone, and the music sounded like wind moving through a canyon. The crowd turned when John entered. Hundreds of alien faces stared at him. Some had long horns, some had skin like glass, some shimmered, as if made of water. They whispered in voices that echoed like bells. But all of them looked at John with the same expression, curiosity mixed with hunger. John's heart beat faster. He had been told this was a peace banquet, a chance to show friendship between humans and the Empire of Siract. He expected polite smiles, maybe a little coldness. But this was different. He felt like an actor stepping onto a stage, with every eye waiting for his first line. A voice boomed from the far end of the hall. The king and queen of Siract sat upon thrones of black stone, taller than mountains in John's imagination. The king rose, his golden robe spilling across the steps. His face was sharp, his skin marked with glowing lines. His voice carried power. "Welcome, John Carter of Earth," the king said. "Tonight you honor us with your presence. Tonight we feast and all the stars bear witness." The crowd cheered, their voices like thunder. The queen lifted her jeweled hand and pointed toward the center of the hall. A seat had been prepared for John, higher than the others, glowing with soft light. It was the seat of honor. Servants rushed to guide him forward, smiling with wide, sharp teeth. John forced himself to walk steadily, though his knees felt weak. He sat, and immediately the music grew louder, brighter, faster. Dishes of food began to appear in front of him. Steaming red fruits, glowing green drinks, pieces of meat that still moved slightly on the plate. Every alien guest leaned forward, watching, waiting. John hesitated. Was he supposed to eat? Was this a test? He picked up a shining fork and stabbed the smallest piece of fruit. It burst with sweet liquid the moment he bit into it. The taste was strange but not unpleasant. The crowd let out a cheer, clapping their clawed hands and stomping the floor. John smiled awkwardly. It felt good to be accepted. Maybe he had worried, for nothing. Maybe this really was just a friendly feast. But then he noticed something that made his skin crawl. The daughters of the royal family sat together at a long table near the thrones. Each one wore a gown of shimmering fabric that moved like water. Their eyes, deep, bright, and unblinking, were all fixed on him. They did not clap. They did not smile. They simply stared, their heads tilted slightly, like hunters watching. "Pray." John shifted in his seat. He tried to look away, but each time he glanced back, their eyes were waiting. One of the daughters leaned forward and whispered to her sister. The sister giggled, but her laugh was sharp, almost cruel. John could not hear the words, but he felt the weight of them. The king raised his goblet filled with a golden liquid that smoked like fire. "Tonight," he said, "we begin a feast unlike any other. Let every guest remember this night, for it marks the bond of stars between Siract and Earth." The crowd roared again. John lifted his cup as well. though his hand shook slightly. He forced a drink, the liquid burning his throat but leaving a strange warmth in his chest. Everyone watched, everyone smiled. But in the corner of his vision, the daughters still stared. For the first time since his arrival, John felt a chill. He was the center of attention, yes, but not in the way he had expected. Something was wrong. Deep down, in a place beyond reason, his instincts whispered, "This is not honor, this is not friendship. You are here for another reason." The music swelled, the lights burned brighter, and the feast began. The music rose higher as servants moved quickly across the banquet hall. Their silver trays carried dishes that glowed, steamed, or even floated in the air. Some plates hissed with sparks of light. Others carried fruits that pulsed like living hearts. Every table filled with strange food. But still the guests kept looking toward John. He felt the weight of those eyes, yet he tried to smile and act calm. He told himself, "This is just their custom. They want me to feel special." But inside, his chest grew tight. He noticed something strange. None of the guests touched their food until he did. Every time he lifted a fork or drank from his cup, the hall grew silent, watching him, and only after he swallowed did the crowd erupt in cheers and begin to eat themselves. John felt like a signal, a trigger. Why are they waiting for me? The king lifted his goblet again. "The human drinks, and so do we," he announced. The crowd raised their cups, their voices shaking the crystal walls. John forced another sip, the burn crawling down his throat. The warmth spread through his chest, but with it came dizziness. His vision blurred for a moment, then cleared. He pressed his hand against the table, pretending he was steady. At that moment, one of the servants leaned close. Her face was hidden beneath a veil of silver cloth. Her voice was barely a whisper, softer than the music. "Do not smile too much, human," she said. "They do not cheer for you, they cheer because you are the gift." John's heart skipped. He turned quickly, but the servant had already moved away, disappearing into the crowd of moving trays and shining lights. The gift, John thought. What does that mean? He glanced around the hall. The laughter, the clapping, the bright lights, all of it seemed different now, almost cruel. His eyes went to the royal daughters. They were still watching, still whispering among themselves. One of them raised a hand and pointed at him for only a second, before lowering it and laughing with her sisters. John's mouth went dry. He wanted to stand, to ask the king directly what this meant, but the eyes of the court held him down. He told himself to stay calm, to wait, to observe. The dishes kept arriving. A silver plate carried a piece of meat that breathed like it was alive. Another dish held a soup that shone with starlight, little sparks dancing in the bowl. John touched nothing, but a servant leaned forward, encouraging him with glowing eyes. Slowly, John picked up his spoon. The soup tasted like fire and honey at once. The crowd cheered again. The queen raised her jeweled hand, smiling as if proud. John put the spoon down quickly, his stomach twisting. He whispered to himself, "They are not cheering for my honor. They are cheering because I eat." Why? The music changed, growing deeper, slower, heavier. Drums beat like a giant heart. The ground seemed to tremble with each strike. The daughters rose from their seats and began to walk slowly around the hall. Their gowns shimmered in colors that shifted like oil on water. The crowd grew silent, watching them circle closer to John's seat. One daughter stopped behind him. Another moved to his left, her eyes glowing faint green. They said nothing, but their presence pressed against him like a wall. He felt trapped in his chair. The king lifted his voice again. "Tonight, the bond of stars grows strong. Tonight, my daughters look upon the future of Serath." The hall thundered with cheers, but John noticed something else. Not a single cheer came from the daughters. Their eyes remained fixed on him, cold and hungry. He leaned toward the queen, forcing courage into his voice. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "may I ask, why am I given such honor?" The queen smiled with lips painted in black. Her eyes glittered like knives. "Because you are rare," she said simply. because tonight, you are the center of our feast." John tried to laugh politely, but the sound cracked in his throat. The center? The gift? The words of the servant came back to him. The daughters stopped walking. They formed a half circle, standing just beyond his seat. The youngest one stepped forward, her voice soft but clear enough for John alone. "Do not resist," she whispered. "If you fight, you will die before morning. If you obey, you may live." John froze. The hall was still filled with music and laughter, yet the words cut through it like a blade. He turned his head slightly, but the daughter had already stepped back, blending with her sisters. The king raised his hand once more. "Let the feast continue," he shouted. The music exploded with sound, the crowd roared, and more dishes flooded the tables. But John no longer tasted anything. His hands shook, his mouth was dry, and his mind spun with fear. He was not a guest. He was not an ambassador. He was something else. And tonight, he was part of a ritual he did not understand. The banquet hall still echoed with cheers, but to John the sound no longer felt like joy. It was a drumbeat of warning. Every laugh sounded sharp. Every smile seemed like a mask hiding teeth. He lifted his goblet again, pretending calm, though his hand shook against the shining metal. The alien drink burned his throat, leaving behind a heavy warmth that spread through his chest. He put the cup down and scanned the room. The daughters of the royal house had returned to their seats, but their eyes did not leave him. They watched as hunters watched a caged animal, patient and hungry. John leaned back slightly, his mind racing. The servant said, "I am the gift." The queen said, "I am the center of the feast." What does it mean? Why do they look at me like that? The music slowed again, softer now, like the whisper of wind through ruins. A servant moved behind him, pouring more of the golden drink into his goblet. Her veil brushed his shoulder, and again he heard that same secret voice. "You must understand," the servant whispered. "This is no honor. You are here as the offering." John's breath caught. He turned quickly, trying to see her face, but she lowered her head and slipped away before anyone noticed. The offering. The words rattled in his skull. He tried to push them away. Surely she was mistaken. Surely this was only a misunderstanding. But the look in the daughter's eyes told him otherwise. The king rose once more. His robe of gold shimmered, and the hall fell silent at his gesture. "Tonight," the king said, "we celebrate the strength of Sirac. And tonight, we give my daughters the chance to claim what no daughter has claimed before." The crowd roared. Their voices shook the crystals in the ceiling, sending tiny sparks of light raining down. John felt the floor tremble beneath his boots. The queen stood, her gaze sharp. "Human," she said, her voice clear. "Do you know why you sit in the place of honor?" John swallowed hard. He stood slowly, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Because Earth and Sirac seek friendship?" The queen's smile widened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Yes, friendship. And gifts are the roots of friendship. Tonight, you are that gift." The hall erupted in cheers again, but John's blood ran cold. He could not move. He stared at the queen, waiting for her words to change, waiting for someone to laugh and call it a joke. But no one laughed. The daughters rose again. One by one, they stepped down from their table, their gowns trailing like rivers of light. They approached slowly, circling him once more. The youngest paused at his side, close enough for him to hear her whisper, "Do not fight. If you fight, they will cut you apart. If you obey, you may live to see another dawn." John's chest tightened. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the ring of daughters and the countless alien eyes kept him frozen. The king lifted his goblet high. Let the choosing begin. The music thundered. Drums pounded, horns cried, and the floor shook with stomps of clawed feet. The daughters began to circle John more closely now, their eyes shining, their voices soft. They spoke in a language he did not know, yet each word dripped with hunger. One of the older daughters leaned close, her eyes sharp like blades. "I will take him," she said in a deep voice, though whether to her sisters or to the hall John could not tell. Another daughter hissed back, "No, he will be mine." The crowd cheered louder, their excitement growing as if they were watching a contest. John felt his stomach twist. He understood now. He was not a guest. He was the prize. He turned his gaze toward the throne, desperate. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice breaking, "I am not. I cannot be part of this." But the king's eyes silenced him. Cold, merciless eyes. "You are already part of this, human," the king said. "From the moment you set foot in this hall, you belong to Seract. My daughters will decide your fate. It is an honor beyond measure." John's heart pounded, his legs trembled. Every instinct told him to fight, to run, but the youngest daughter's warning echoed in his mind. "Do not resist." The daughters pressed closer. Their gowns brushed his arms, their eyes scanning him from head to toe. One reached out and touched his face with cold fingers. Another sniffed the air near him as though smelling his fear. The crowd's voices rose into a chant. The words were strange, but their rhythm was clear. They were calling for the choice, demanding the claim. John's mind screamed with terror, but a small spark of will burned in his chest. He was human. He was not cattle. He was not prey. If he must play their game, he would, but he would also search for a way to survive. He forced a smile, though it shook. He lifted his goblet again, pretending calm. The chant grew louder, the daughters pressed closer, and the king raised his hand. The moment of choosing was near. The hall fell quiet as the king lifted his hand. The thunder of music and chants faded into a silence so heavy it pressed against John's ears. Every alien in the room leaned forward, eyes fixed on him. The air smelled of smoke, sweet fruit, and something sharp, like iron. The daughters stood around him now, close enough that he could feel the heat of their bodies and the shimmer of their gowns. Their eyes glowed in different shades, green, gold, blue, violet, but each one carried the same hunger. John felt trapped, like prey in a circle of predators. The queen's voice cut through the silence. "Daughters of Seract, the time has come. Choose wisely. Choose with strength. Tonight one of you will claim the gift." The crowd erupted in cheers again. The floor shook with their stomps. The ceiling glittered with falling sparks. John's stomach twisted. He forced himself to stand tall, though his knees wanted to collapse. "Gift," he thought bitterly. "They mean me. I am the gift." The eldest daughter stepped forward first. Her gown shimmered like molten gold and her eyes glowed with fire. She circled him slowly, her hand brushing his arm as though testing the strength of his skin. She leaned close, her voice like a hiss. Strong bones, sharp eyes. "You would serve me well." The crowd roared at her words. John's heart raced. Serve? What does she mean by serve? Before he could breathe, another daughter pulled him by the shoulder, turning him toward her. She had silver hair and eyes like the sea. "No," she said, her voice sharp. "He will not be yours, he will be mine. I will take the human and I will bind him to my line." The two sisters stared at each other, their teeth bared, their gowns shimmering with strange light. The crowd cheered louder, clapping, shouting, chanting. John felt his throat close. He had walked into a nightmare, a ritual he could not escape. He was no guest of honor. He was the prize in a contest between daughters of power. The younger daughter stepped closer. One touched his chest, pressing her cold fingers against his heart. Another leaned near his ear and whispered, "Do not resist. Obedience brings life. Defiance brings death." John froze, his breath shaking. The warning was clear. If he fought now, they would tear him apart before the night ended. The king raised his hand again. The hall fell silent. His deep voice echoed through the chamber. "My daughters, you may claim him, but only one may hold the right. Show us your strength. Show us who deserves the gift." The crowd screamed in delight. The music returned, faster, and louder than before. Drums beat like war. The daughters moved around John in a slow circle, their voices rising in strange chants. Each one placed her hand on him for a moment, his shoulder, his arm, his chest, as if marking him, as if testing. Ownership. John's mind raced. I cannot fight them. Not here, not now. But maybe I can play along until I find a way out. He forced himself to smile, though it felt like a mask. He bowed slightly, as if showing respect to the daughters. The crowd cheered louder, mistaking his fear for obedience. The eldest daughter growled, stepping closer, but the youngest suddenly moved between them. She was smaller, her eyes deep blue, her gown darker than the others. She pressed her hand against John's chest, her touch softer, but her whisper was cold. "Do not trust them," she said. "Not my sisters, not even my father. If you want to live, stay with me. Pretend, and I will protect you." John's eyes widened, but before he could answer, she stepped back, her face calm, her voice raised for all to hear. "I claim him." The hall exploded with noise. Cheers, stomps, cries of rage. The eldest daughter shouted in fury, her gown blazing like fire. "You dare challenge me?" The younger one lifted her chin. "Yes, tonight the human is mine." The crowd roared, divided between the sisters. Some cheered for the eldest, others for the youngest. The king's eyes glowed with pride as he watched his daughters fight for the prize. To him, this was not horror. This was tradition. John stood frozen, his heart hammering. He was caught in their struggle, helpless. His life was now a game played by royal daughters, and his fate balanced on their choice. The king raised his hand once more, silencing the hall. "Let it be decided," he said. "By strength, by will, by destiny. Tonight one daughter claims the gift, and all Serac shall witness." The music rose again, sharper than before. The two daughters glared at each other, their gowns shimmering like flames and shadows. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the clash. John stood between them, his heart racing, his mind screaming. He was not a man at a feast. He was not an ambassador. He was a living prize in a deadly ritual, and as the two daughters prepared to fight, John realized the truth. His survival depended not on honor, but on choosing the right side. The hall trembled with shouts and music. The eldest daughter glared with burning eyes, her gown glowing like molten fire. The youngest stood calm but firm, her blue eyes sharp, her gown dark as night. Between them stood John, his heart beating, so fast he could barely breathe. The king raised his hand. His voice was heavy and final. "Let it be decided, by strength, by claim, by the will of Serac." The crowd erupted again, chanting and stomping. Their excitement shook the crystal, sealing until sparks of light rained down like stars. John stood frozen. He was not just part of the feast anymore. He was the center of a storm. The eldest daughter stepped forward. "He is mine," she said, her voice deep, her hand reaching toward John. "He is strong. He will bear my name, and I will bind him to my bloodline." The youngest daughter blocked her path. Her voice was soft but filled with steel. "No, he belongs with me. He is not for your games. He is not a toy to break. I will take him, and he will live." The crowd gasped. Aliens muttered in shock. No daughter had spoken of mercy before. No daughter had spoken of life. John's eyes darted between them. He did not understand all their words, but their tone was clear. One promised possession, the other promised survival. Which is true? Which is a lie? The king leaned forward on his throne, his golden robe shining. His smile was cruel yet proud. To him, this was not cruelty, it was entertainment, a sacred tradition. "Daughters," he said, "show your strength. Only the strongest may claim the gift." The music exploded again. Drums pounded like thunder, horns screamed. The two sisters began to circle each other, their gowns swirling with light and shadow. The crowd cheered, waiting for a fight. John stood trapped in the middle. He wanted to run, but where? The hall was sealed, every exit guarded. He was a human among thousands of aliens, each one stronger and faster than him. His only hope was to think, to act carefully, to play their game. The eldest lunged first. Her gown flared like fire, her eyes blazing. The youngest stepped aside, graceful as water, and the crowd roared with excitement. They moved around John like predators fighting over prey, their voices sharp, their hands reaching for him. One moment, the eldest grabbed his arm, pulling him close. "Do not resist," she hissed. "Obey me, and I will keep you. Defy me, and I will break you." Before John could answer, the youngest tore him away, her hand gentle but firm. She leaned close to his ear, whispering so softly only he could hear. "Trust me. If you want to live, stay with me. It is your only chance." John's mind spun. Who do I trust? Who do I obey? Both sisters claimed him. Both promised survival in their own way. But only one could be telling the truth. The crowd's chant grew louder, faster. The words echoed through the hall like a drumbeat. "Choose, choose, choose." The king raised his goblet again, his voice booming over the noise. "Let the human decide." The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to John. His knees shook. His throat was dry. He could barely breathe. He looked at the eldest, then at the youngest. Both stood with hands outstretched, waiting for him to choose. His chest tightened. If he chose wrong, he would die. If he refused, they would kill him on the spot. His entire fate rested on this moment. The youngest whispered again, her lips barely moving. "Pretend, take my hand. Live another night." John's instincts screamed. He could not trust anyone, but he had no choice. Slowly, trembling, he lifted his hand. He reached toward. The hall erupted before he could finish. The eldest lunged, the youngest stepped forward, and their hands clashed around his wrist. The crowd screamed with joy, their cheers shaking the hall like an earthquake. John's heart raced. He was no longer choosing. The daughters were fighting for him, their voices rising in anger, their gowns blazing with power. The king watched with shining eyes. The queen smiled coldly. The crowd cheered as if blood would soon spill. The youngest leaned close in the chaos, her words sharp and quick. "Tonight is not the end. Play along, survive. I will find you when the lights go dark." John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, the drums boomed again. The king rose to his feet, lifting both hands. "Enough," he thundered. "The choice shall be sealed at dawn. Until then, the human belongs to the house of Serath. Let the feast continue." The crowd roared, the music surged, and the daughters stepped back, their eyes still burning with hunger. John stood shaking, his wrist still tingling from their touch. His fate had not been decided yet, but now he knew the truth. He was not the guest. He was the prize, and when dawn came, his life would be sealed forever. The banquet lasted deep into the night. Music thundered, alien voices sang, and the crowd feasted without pause. But John did not eat. He sat at the center of it all, a silent figure in a storm of lights and noise. His hands trembled beneath the table. His mind spun with fear. The king's words echoed in his head. "The choice shall be sealed at dawn." Dawn. That was the limit of his life, unless he found a way out. The eldest daughter sat near the throne, her eyes still burning like fire. Every few minutes she glanced at John, her smile sharp, her fingers tapping the arm of her chair. She looked like a predator waiting for the moment to strike. The youngest daughter sat farther back, calmer, quieter. She did not cheer with the others, nor did she laugh. Instead, her gaze stayed fixed on John. Once, when no one was watching, she raised her hand slightly and mouthed a single word. "Wait." John's chest tightened. Could he trust her? Was she truly different from her sisters, or only playing her own game? The feast went on. Alien dancers spun across the hall, their bodies glowing with shifting colors. Servants carried more dishes, bowls of glowing liquid, slabs of meat that sizzled and hissed, towers of fruit that burst with light when cut. The guests roared in joy, their voices shaking the hall. But to John, it was all noise. He felt the seconds slipping away, dragging him toward dawn. At last, the music slowed. The king rose once more, his robe golden, his eyes sharp as blades. He raised his goblet high. The night is long, but the dawn comes soon. When the first light touches our world, the daughters shall bring their claim. Until then, let the human be prepared. The crowd shouted in agreement. 2 guards approached John. Their armor glowed faintly and their silver eyes gave no mercy. They lifted him from his seat, pulling him toward a door at the side of the hall. John tried to keep his breath steady, but his stomach twisted. He looked once more at the youngest daughter. Her lips moved silently. "Trust me." The guards led him down a long corridor lit by cold blue lights. The sounds of the banquet faded behind him, replaced by the hum of unseen machines. The walls shimmered like liquid metal, shifting with every step. Finally, they reached a chamber. The door slid open with a hiss, and John was pushed inside. The room was round with walls of stone and crystal. In the center stood a pedestal with strange carvings. A bed of dark cloth lay nearby, too fine to be a prison, too strange to be a comfort. The guards left without a word, the door sealing shut behind them. John stood alone in the chamber. His legs shook, his hands clenched. He looked at the bed, then at the carvings, then at the walls. This is not a guest room, he thought. This is a cage. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. He pressed his ear to the door, but there was no sound outside. Then softly he heard a voice. "Do not be afraid." John spun. The youngest daughter stood in the corner of the room. She had entered silently, her gown dark as shadows, her eyes glowing faint blue. "How did you—" John began, but she raised a finger to her lips. "No questions now. Listen carefully. My sisters will fight at dawn. The one who wins will bind you. It is our law. You will not leave this palace alive if you resist." John's voice cracked. "Then why are you here? Why warn me?" Her eyes softened, though her voice stayed firm. "Because I am not like them. I do not want you broken. I want you to survive. But survival will cost you." John's stomach twisted. "What cost?" She stepped closer. "Obedience. Pretend you are mine. Let them believe I claimed you. In time I will find a way to free you. But if you fight, you will be torn apart before the sun rises." John shook his head, his voice low. "How do I know? You're not lying. How do I know you're not just another predator?" Her eyes locked with his. For the first time that night he saw something different. Not hunger, not cruelty, but something closer to fear. "Because," she whispered, "I too am a prisoner in this court." John froze. Her words sank deep. A daughter of the king, trapped in her own palace. Could it be true? The chamber shook faintly as a drum echoed from the hall. The sound was distant, but powerful. Dawn was coming closer. The daughter stepped back, her face hardening. "Decide quickly, human. At dawn, the choice will be sealed. If you stand with me, I may save you. If you stand against me, you will not live to see another night." She moved toward the door. The crystal wall shimmered, opening for her as if obeying her will. Before leaving, she looked back once more. "Remember, pretend, survive, then wait for me." The door sealed shut again. John stood alone in the silence, his chest heavy, his mind torn. The truth was clear now. He was not just the offering. He was also a weapon in the war between daughters, a pawn in their hidden struggle. And when dawn came, his choice would decide not only his life, but perhaps hers as well. The night faded slowly, swallowed by silence. In his chamber, John sat on the cold floor, his back against the crystal wall. His body ached from tension, but his mind refused to rest. He kept hearing the youngest daughter's words. Pretend. Survive. Then wait for me. Pretend. It sounded simple, but the weight of it crushed him. If he played along, he might live. If he made a single mistake, He would die before anyone back on Earth even knew what happened. The floor vibrated as drums thundered in the distance. Each beat was like the pulse of a giant heart. The ritual was beginning. Dawn had arrived. The chamber door slid open with a hiss. 2 guards stood outside, their armor glowing faint silver, their faces blank. "It is time," one said in a flat voice. John forced himself to stand. His legs shook, but he straightened his shoulders. He would not let them see fear. Slowly, he followed the guards down the long corridor. The hall looked different now. The crystal lights burned brighter, casting sharp shadows. The tables were gone. The feast cleared away. Instead, the floor was marked with glowing lines that formed a great circle in the center of the room. The guests filled the outer ring, their eyes gleaming with hunger and excitement. At the far end, the king and queen sat upon their thrones, towering like gods above the crowd. The daughters stood before them, each in gowns brighter than before, shimmering with unnatural light. The king's voice shook the hall. "The night has passed. The feast is ended. Now comes the trial of dawn. Let the daughters of Serac step forward, and let the gift be placed at the center." The guards pushed John into the circle. His boots scraped against the glowing lines. He felt exposed, trapped under 1,000 eyes. He forced his breath steady, but his chest pounded. The eldest daughter stepped forward first. Her gown burned. With golden red, her eyes fierce as fire. She raised her hand high. "I claim him. He will strengthen my bloodline, and through him, my line will rise above all others." The crowd shouted in approval, their voices shaking the floor. The youngest daughter stepped forward next. Her gown shimmered dark blue, her eyes glowing with calm fire. "I claim him," she said, her voice steady but sharp, "but not as a slave, not as a broken thing. I claim him to preserve his life, and through him, I will change the old ways." The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like fire across the hall. To speak of change was dangerous. To show mercy was almost heresy. The king's smile widened. 2 daughters claim the gift. Then let tradition decide. By trial of strength, by test of will, one shall prevail. The music roared to life. Drums thundered, horns screamed. The 2 daughters circled the glowing lines, their gowns swirling, their eyes locked in fury. The crowd chanted in rhythm with the drums, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" John stood frozen in the center. His heart raced. He was not just the prize. They were about to fight over him, and his life hung on the outcome. The eldest struck first. Her gown blazed, and a burst of fire leapt from her hands, searing the air. The youngest moved like water, her gown flowing, deflecting the flame with a wave of shimmering light. The crowd roared in delight. They clashed again and again, their powers colliding, sparks flying, the floor shaking beneath their fury. John stumbled back, shielding his face from the blasts of heat and light. He was trapped in the center of their storm. The eldest screamed, her voice sharp as steel. "You are weak. You disgrace our line with mercy." The youngest answered, her voice steady. "Mercy is not weakness. It is strength that you will never understand." The crowd screamed louder, divided between rage and awe. The king leaned forward, his eyes glowing, proud of the violence. The queen's smile was colder, sharper. John's mind raced. If the eldest wins, I will be destroyed. If the youngest wins, maybe I live. But only if I play along, only if I trust her. The eldest lunged again, her hands blazing with golden fire. The youngest countered with a shield of dark light, sparks exploding around them. The force threw John to the ground. His palms scraped against the glowing floor. He looked up at the youngest. For just a moment, her eyes met his, and she mouthed a single word. "Now." John froze. Did she mean act? Did she mean choose? His chest tightened. This was his moment. His chance to prove loyalty, to pretend, to survive. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. He raised his hand, not toward the eldest, but toward the youngest. The hall fell silent. Every eye locked on him. I choose her," John said, his voice shaking but clear. The crowd gasped. The eldest roared in fury, her gown blazing hotter. She charged toward him, her fire bright enough to blind. But the youngest moved faster. She stepped between John and her sister, her gown flaring like a shield of stars. The flame struck, but she held firm, pushing the eldest back with a wave of blue light. The hall shook with noise, cheers, screams, chants. The king rose from his throne, his voice booming. So it is done, the human has chosen, the ritual is sealed. The youngest daughter claims the gift. The crowd exploded in chaos, half in fury, half in joy. The eldest screamed, her rage echoing like thunder. The youngest placed her hand on John's shoulder, her grip firm but steady. And in that touch, John felt the truth. He had chosen her, but he had not escaped. He was still bound, still trapped in a game far larger than himself. The dawn light spilled through the crystal ceiling, and with it came the final seal of the ritual. John Carter, human of Earth, was no longer free.